The violin was developed hundreds of years ago. It has changed a little over the centuries, but not essentially. It is said that next to the human voice, the violin has the greatest range of expression of all the musical instruments. Composers from Beethoven and Bach to the Beatles and Bob Dylan have found room for the violin in their music, and its tone has sounded everywhere from European castles to Appalachian log cabins because it pleases people to hear and play it. Violin playing is as varied as the individual who plays it. This video is dedicated to anyone who ever has or will venture down the road to understanding the violin. We all started out knowing only that we want to make that sound, the sound of the violin. Hello, I'm Ed Marsh, and I'd like to welcome you to the Basic Violin video. Over the years, I've helped hundreds of people learn how to play the violin, just as I'm going to do with you on this video. The place to start with the violin is that thing that makes it so distinctive, the fact that it's played with a bow and not a pick or with a hammer like on a guitar or a piano or something like that. So let's get started, and I'm going to show you some of the basic grips that the right hand is using on the bow. If you'll look, you'll see that my little finger is pointing into the top of the stick, not overlapped like this, but right into the stick. My middle two fingers are resting against the frog. That's that part of the bow that's holding the hair at the bottom. And my first finger is resting on the stick up here, where this silver wrapping is. Now there's two things you do with the bow, essentially. One is to pick it up, and the other is to put it down on the instrument and play. When you're lifting, almost all the pressure is on the little finger, and I couldn't lift that without the stick tilting downward. But when you're lifting, the first finger is really not doing much more than steadying the stick. Now this is a very important point, because when you begin to play, that is, when you lay the bow down on the string and start to drag it, the little finger becomes less important, and the first finger is applying pressure. I'm going to turn my hand over and let you see that my thumb is just pointing into the stick. It's not stuck through the bow like this, but it's pointing into the stick. And you'll also notice, though I can roll it outward, that the hair of the bow is resting against my finger right behind the fingernail. Now this two-point contact of the thumb gives you a lot of steadiness. And since I've got the bow turned over, of course, it's resting against my first finger. And if you'll do this, you'll see that's very much like a playing action. Now, as I roll my hand over, I can feel the pressure come back to my little finger. Roll the stick over, and you feel it on the first finger. Remember, you lift, and you have pressure on the little finger. When you play, you're applying downward pressure on the first finger. The bow acts as a lever in violin playing. It's held up by the strings and supported by these middle two fingers. And right in the middle there with the first finger here, you're pressing down on the stick. Now we're going to get a shot of the violin, and I want you to see what my right hand is doing. Watch the stick and the hair. Can you see that the stick is going down towards the hair? That's because I'm rotating my hand counterclockwise, and that first finger is pressing the stick down towards the hair. There's some basic kinds of violin playing. The first one that I want to talk about is called a plain bow or legato bowing. This is an Italian term, and since the violin was developed in Italy, I think the Italian terms have held on for so long. Legato means that you simply put the bow on the string, apply a little bit of pressure by rotating your hand counterclockwise, and pull the stick perpendicular to the string. When your hand is moving outward from your body, that's called the down bow. And when your hand is coming up towards the body, that's called the up bow. These are very basic terms. Now, I want to tell you something about rhythm and bowing. With the violin, you play the pitches with your left hand, but you play the rhythm with your right hand most of the time. And so if you take a basic rhythm like shaving a haircut, 10 cents, I want to leave you for just a second and let you practice some basic rhythms. Some people like the rhythm hamburger, hamburger, or polka dot, polka dot. You directly transform rhythm in your head into a bow movement. I'll give you just a second to work on that, and I'll be right back. How did that work out? Good, I hope. The next thing I'd like to talk about is what is called slurring notes together, or playing a slur. The slur mark looks like a hunting bow, just a curved line, like any bow and arrow you've seen. And I think what that used to mean was that you hook several notes together on one bow stroke. And so what we're going to do now is play from one string to another, keeping the bow moving in one direction. I'm going to go from one of the middle strings to the other, all with a down bow. Remember, down bow is when the bow moves away from your body. Stop. Then up bow, down bow. Now that is your basic slurred stroke. When we're fingering notes later, you'll be moving from one finger to another, but you'll be keeping the bow going in the same direction. The largest string is the G string, the next one the D, the next one the A, and the littlest one the E string. And what I want you to do for the next exercise is work on pairs of strings, playing a down bow and going from the low one to the higher one, then an up bow, go from the high back to the low, and continue that for a while to study this slurring exercise like this. Or on the higher strings. Slurring. I'd like for you to work on that, and we'll be right back. Now that we've worked on our legato bow stroke and we've slurred bowings together, I'd like to go to another style of bowing called portato. Portato means that you stop the bow but then continue on in the same direction. So you can get several notes out of one long bow. Let me demonstrate this on the G string. Down bow, stop, more down bow, stop, more down bow, stop, more down bow. Now's a good time to discuss how the bow should travel across the string. As we were taking a short stroke, we didn't have trouble keeping the bow sort of centered, but as you do portato and go all the way from the frog down to the tip of the bow, you'll see that you have trouble keeping the stick aligned parallel to the bridge unless you're careful. There's lots of little rules of thumb that people use to talk about this, but what is important is to look at it in a mirror and to feel the way your hand feels and straighten this bow stroke out by watching and see, get used to the feeling, and do it quite a bit. Now you can do portato down bow and you can do it up bow, and the best thing to do is try to divide the bow into the 4 quarters and take a quarter of a bow each stroke down and then a quarter and come back, and you'll see that it takes a little practice to get used to that, and then you can do a lot more with the violin. I'll be right back for the next lesson. So far, we worked on strokes where the bow was in constant contact with the strings. Just to recap, remember that your first finger, your index finger, is applying downward pressure onto the stick, and your thumb in 2 points is supporting the bow stick. The reason I want to go back over this is because now we're going to practice leaving the string in an off-string movement. This bow style is called spiccato. Spiccato is literally a bouncing stroke. You've heard this a lot in violin and fiddle music before, and what is required is that the little finger come into play, and the first finger pushes the bow down a lot like a dribbling motion, and then it bounces back up, and the hand holds the bow again until you're ready to let it down. It's obvious that the little finger and the first finger have to work in coordination here. Don't hold the bow firmly in your hand and try to hit it like you're hitting something with the stick, but try to let this bouncing up and down motion take place. Now I'm going to demonstrate the spiccato bow here. Bounce on a down bow, bounce on an up bow. It's easy to forget that you have to move the stick up and down as well as just let it bounce, otherwise it makes almost no noise. Down bow, catch, release, up bow. If you try to do this on 2 sets of strings, in other words, 2 strings at a time instead of just 1, it takes a lot more bow accuracy. So I suggest that you try all these bowing movements on 2 sometimes as well as 1. I'm going to use the 2 big strings, the G and the D now, and try to keep an even, constant spiccato stroke going. Keep it steady. Double time. Half time. You can do it up at the frog. You can do it down at the tip. See, that's a very different tone. Get to know these tones and don't try to make these sounds with the bow in the wrong place. Here's what the middle sounds like. Tip, frog. There's a lot of power in the frog part of the bow, a moderate amount in the middle, and very little at the tip. Your exercise is to try this motion on all the sets of strings, and we'll be back with the next lesson. There's one last bow stroke I'd like to talk about before we move to the left hand, but I want to say right off the bat that this is a difficult stroke. It's really not something a beginner can do very well, but if you hear it, if you see it happen and you understand what's going on, it gives you something to work to down the road. And this is called the saltando stroke. It is an off-the-string stroke, but it's not a catch and release stroke. It's actually a true dribble. When you dribble the basketball, you don't put it down once, catch it, put it down once and catch it. In fact, that's illegal. And in saltando, that's illegal. This is a stroke that takes place in the middle of the bow. And I don't know if you've heard a tennis player or a golfer say that their club or racket has a sweet spot. But every bow is different, and they have a sweet spot, a place in the stick where this is going to work. And it's difficult to do this anywhere else. It sounds like this, and I'm just going to demonstrate it so that you can hear what a saltando sounds like. And if you're real brave, you can try it. Now here's a fast legato stroke. And in that whole stroke, I'm keeping the bow down on the string because it's an on-string bowing. But in saltando, I'm going to start pulling the bow and rotating my wrist until the bow starts to bounce. This is really fun to do when it finally works for you. Can you hear it bouncing? That's the saltando stroke. The bowing section of the lesson is now over, and we're going to move on to the left hand. So take a little time to review these things. They'll be coming back.